Zola Levitt Presents with Dr. Jeffrey Seif and Sandra Levitt. She shall be called woman.
I came forth from a man.
But I found favor with him.
And true success is not measured in wealth and power, but in the estate of one's heart.
I've never been happier and more fulfilled.
I raised him up strictly in the faith,
and more.
the law, and the prophets.
And now I want to give something back.
I believe Elohim meant it to be this way.
She's still a cornerstone of wisdom to the family.
But you
And as
are
I see-
always in my heart. My son, I know we were together only for a short time, but you are always in my heart. I think of you daily, and you may not understand now, but I made a vow to Yahweh that if He would turn my affliction and give me a son, I would give the child back all the days of his life. That is why you live in the house of Elohim and serve the priests. Listen carefully and obey them, for it is their charge to teach you the ways of Yahweh. Samuel, I will always be your mother, and you will always be my son. Wear this to keep you warm and to remember me when you are lonely.
A hearty shalom to all of you. Jeffrey Seif here with my friend Sandra Levitt.
Shalom, welcome back. We're doing women, the series about women. Thou shalt be called woman. Wonderful.
It's a great story, and this story is touching today as we look at Hannah, a woman who was misunderstood by men, a woman that was betrayed by circumstances evidenced by her being unable to bear a child. So much for the bad news. The good news is God loved her and redeemed her, didn't He?
God gave her more than what she asked for. She asked for just a son. He gave her Samuel, the last judge of Israel. He gave her Samuel, much more than what she asked for.
There's a Jewish expression that goes that even when the gates of heaven are closed to prayers, they're open to tears. And here's a woman who just privately was so chagrined by her circumstance, and God moved into her world so wonderfully.
And took all her cares away. We're going to see Jeff in Israel teaching about Hannah.
As the book of 1 Samuel or Shmuel begins, Jerusalem is in the hands of the Jebusi, the Jebusites. David is soon to come, but he doesn't appear in the narrative yet. In fact, there is no king in Israel. The Jewish people don't have a central leader. There is no capital city. What you have are individuals living out in various farming communities. They live in villages. They live in humble homes, just like Elkanah here. The Bible isn't well studied. Some, like this fellow, are given to the study of Scripture, but by and large, it's been neglected for years. But still, there are righteous souls trying to eke out an existence and find some security in a rather insecure world. Here in Ephraim, there was a man, Elkanah, who had a wife, Peninnah, and a wife, Hannah. Hannah is particularly noted to be a beautiful woman, a sincere, devoted woman, but she's just given over to trouble. She lived a rather rural existence. You know, they farmed, they learned to domesticate livestock and use it. They gathered the fruits of the earth. In effect, they live a peasant life. They didn't expect much, but a woman still expects love, and it's not too much to ask to find love from a man, and it's not too much to ask for children. Oh, Hannah was a broken woman. We learn this story in 1 Samuel, how she's so very vexed. Not only is she unable to bear a child, she's really unable to bear the angst generated because her rival, the other woman in the house, is given to childbearing and is forever putting a thorn in the side of Hannah. Why is that? Because her husband loved her so very much. He loves her even though she doesn't have a child. And he even says to her at one point, "Dear," he says, "am I not worth more to you than 10 children?" You know, on one hand, I can appreciate his sentiments, but the answer in truth is, no, you're not. Why is that? Because she was driven so much for a desire to bear. And what does she do? I'm sure you can recall the story. She goes to the tabernacle, the Mishkan, this worship center that was set up and long since neglected, and there she prays, "God, please, I beg you, please, please give me a child, and if you do that, I will dedicate that child to you." You know what happens? She does just that, and God does just that. She's going to conceive a child. Oh, marvelous is this woman. And there's a beautiful story that unfolds here of a woman's love for a child. And this is our beginning point as we consider motherhood, this sacred act of bringing life into the world. And we'll consider this as we study the Torah on motherhood. What does the scripture say? Untativ Adonai kol yemei chayav. This is quoting Hannah, who's there beseeching God at the Mishkan, saying that if you'll but give me a child, I'll give him back to you all the days of his life. This, in the Shmuel text, is the equivalent of what we find in the Matthean Gospel, where Jesus is on record saying, if you'd seek first the kingdom, I'll give everything else to you. This woman is saying, God, I want to put you first. And she says that believing that God is going to, in fact, act on her behalf. I think it's very interesting for a variety of reasons, one of which is here you're looking in the Hebrew Bible and discovering a woman who is authorized to make a vow. This to me is reflective of a number of things, one of which is the fact that she isn't construed as simply the love slave of the male in her life, nor is she simply domestic help to work around the home and serve the family's various material needs and interests. To be sure, she does bear children, and yes, she helps around the house, but this is a woman that's empowered. She's authorized in various ways. This is evidenced, in fact, because later on, when it comes time to fulfill the vow, her husband Elkanah says, well, shall we now give this child over the Lord as per your vow? And she says, 'tis not the time. And she, in effect, is told by him, listen, do whatever your pleasure is. Do what seems best. Here again, there's an example where a woman has social power. And this is striking. Today, I've discovered in a past career as a police officer many examples of men who neglect and abuse women, who treat them as property to push them around. And I observe in the world today as well that some religious traditions seem to sanction a vision of a woman as just the property of a male, a love slave, someone to do his material bidding. The Hebrew Bible, however, casts the vision for a woman of worth, a woman of value. This is evidenced in creation, in fact, where we discover that she is made from Adam and in some sense then is her equal, not just his property. I'd like to sit down and take you to the time when Moses stood up and delivered the Luchos, the commandments. You might recall he goes to Har Sinai, to Mount Sinai, and he comes down with the Luchos, with the commandments, with these, the table of 10. Principle in that table is a mandate. It's observed in the book Shemot in Exodus chapter 20, verse 12. Therein, the Israelites were told to honor your father and your mother. It's extremely important not just for men to honor their wives, but it's important for the children to honor the father and the mother. And the reason why I want to underscore mother here for the young is because later on, when this is repeated in Vayikra in Leviticus, there in the 19th chapter, the order is reversed. Moses there reiterates and says, this time, honor your mother and your father. Hence the importance of valuing a mother. Inasmuch as we see women so vested in the care of their young, so it is imperative upon the males of the species to value the mother and for the children of the species to value the mother. This is underscored in the Hebrew Bible with the notation that one must needs do so in order for their days to be prolonged upon the earth. This is one of the few of the 613 examples where there's instruction, and then it says, do this in order that you may be successful in life. This point is underscored beautifully, it seems to me, in the Hebrew Bible in the book Devarim. Devarim in Hebrew means the words. It's known as Deuteronomos, from the Greek meaning second law. Therein, in the 22nd chapter, there's what seems to be an insignificant story. Here, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, is on record saying that if you walk along the path and stumble upon a nest, or if not on the path, if you see a nest that just happens to be upon the ground, one that fell from a tree branch, and as this one here has fallen and eggs have fallen out, here the instruction is that if a person is walking along the path or discovers a nest, and that person says, I want to eat the young, the person is told that if the mother bird is around, they are not allowed to touch the eggs. The instruction in 22:6 and 7 is that one must needs shoo away the mother. And after doing so, then the person can take the eggs. And after this law, one of the 613, it says, do this in order that your days might be prolonged upon the earth. Here we're looking at the few examples, Spartan texts, where there's a commandment to do this in order that you may prosper. And why is that? So sacred is the bond between a child and a parent that it extends not just to humans, but to the smallest of creatures, the birds. The Hebrew child is instructed that the relationship between a mother and a child is sacred, and so it is that the children must needs honor, respect, and help the mother. If this boy learns this at a young age, you know what's going to happen? Inasmuch as he's learned to honor his mother, he's going to grow up, and you know what? He's going to honor his wife. Would we not do well to open up the Hebrew Bible and come to terms with the obligations to honor the women in our world, our daughters, our mothers, our wives? Hannah was a loving mother, wasn't she? And that reminds me that we're obligated to in turn love our mothers, to return that favor. This is underscored in Deuteronomy and elsewhere, where we see the imperative that children respect their mothers and their fathers. And there's consequences for not doing, correct?
God thought it was important, or he wouldn't have put it as one of the 10 Commandments.
True. And we live in a world today where it's important to reaffirm that value. I see disrespect. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It comes out in family systems, and it comes out in passing, too. I see when a parent passes, sometimes the kids are like hungry sharks about what kind of inheritance there is and what I can get. There's a feeding frenzy.
Well, we just have a different take on the family now, and I think we need to get back to the basics of respecting each other. Again, it comes down to respecting each other again.
And that's why I like going back to the Bible.
Right.
There's the old expression, keep it simple, stupid. And the Bible takes us back and helps us to get oriented to see how we should be as husbands and wives, mothers and fathers and children. It's all good.
Children. What is our moral compass? The Bible is our moral compass, and we have lost it sometimes. So this is good to get back to do this.
Yes, and it helps us to fall in love with our mothers afresh, and we consider how beautiful motherhood is.
Right. I talked to Sharon Sanders in Israel.
Quite a mother there.
She really was. I asked her how long they had lived in Israel, how long they'd been there, and they are with the Christian Friends of Israel. And it's just exactly what it says. They are Christian Friends of Israel. And they, too, do reconstruction. They also furnish food. They go out and they talk to people. They really literally open their arms to all the Jews. She's just wonderful.
You know, I had her daughter as a student.
That's right.
Being a college professor preparing for ministry. She and her son-in-law. She's doing a great work there.
They really are. And I asked her, really, how long have you lived in Israel? And this is her story. Here's Sharon Sanders.
Well, Sandra, we've been here 22 years. My husband and I came from the Midwest of the United States of America. And I could say that the last 22 years have been the best years of our life. They've been hard, they've been difficult, but they've been good. And I believe that one has to have determination to live here. One has to be devoted to live here, and you've got to be a little bit courageous.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think especially if you're a woman of faith in the Lord. Devotion, of course, to God is the whole thing. If you have a call from God, because that's the only thing that'll keep you here. And I think determination of whatever God's called you to do. If you've seen a need, you go and meet it. That's what I call a woman of faith and being a believer here in Israel. There's so many needs in this country. We see needs every day of our life of Jewish people from every walk of life, and even a lot of non-Jewish people who are now in the land. But I believe that courage also, we have a lot of paradigms in the Bible.
Right, right. Women of courage, right.
Yael, Ruth, they all had their wonderful aspects and characteristics of being courageous and doing something. I think of the words of, do you remember Irma Bombeck?
Oh, yes. She was so
funny. She was a humorous writer.
Right.
She talked a lot about women, about home life, but she said one thing that has changed my life. She said something like, when I come to the end of my life and I stand before God, I want to have used up every bit of talent and ability that I had within me. And when I say to him, I used it all. I used every bit. That's what I want to say.
Oh, amen.
Whatever's within me, I want to use it for the kingdom. Because it's really not about us. It's about him and others. And I think living here has taught me humility, for one thing. I see so many needs. And the Lord told me once, to go higher with me, you need to go lower, Sharon. And I asked what that meant. And he said, what did my son do when he washed the feet of his disciples? That was me, God, with a towel in my hand. And so I've learned in my years here to go to places where nobody else wants to go, to sit at the feet of the Jewish people and hear them, hear their stories, listen to them, their pain, their suffering. And I will say that probably our feet have gone places where few other feet have gone.
We sometimes think that we don't make a difference in the little things we do, but the hospitality that we do, the kind words that we do, the listening to people, makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, the listening important. We always like to do a lot of talking, but I've learned to listen in Israel. That's one of the things I've learned to do, because the Israelis, the Jewish people, have so much to say. Whether they're young, maybe they've suffered terrorist attacks, which was terrible, completely different than an older person who suffered many years during the war. But they've all got a story, and so I've learned to listen. For me, life here and the work that we do, it's simply taking the love of the Lord back to the very people who brought it to us in the beginning. And helping to undo some of the damage that's been done over the past.
Where do you see the ministry going? What are your hopes? What are your dreams?
Well, 22 years ago, the Jewish people, when we arrived, it was like, keep your distance. We remember World War II. We remember what Christians did. And so it hasn't been easy. We had to roll up those sleeves and go to work. And even if they didn't want to have anything to do with us, we just had to keep giving love, the love of the Lord. Let me tell you one thing. There was a Holocaust survivor. Her name was Seif. She was a Bergen-Belsen survivor. I wanted to hug her because I was a Christian. She said, I don't want your hug. I don't want anything to do with you because of what your people did to my people during World War II. You closed your doors. You pulled down the shades. We were standing outside in the street. And yet I wanted to meet survivors, so Seif took me. We began to go. And one day, 2 years later, she threw her arms around me. Said, I love you. She said, you are the first Christian that ever came to my people, and I have watched you for 2 years or more. You really do love my people. You do love them. She said, I've watched you and I've seen you. And so this is what's happened. 22 years of Christian ministries. Others like ourselves, just giving the love of God. Who would have dreamt that Christians would sit in the Knesset today, in a Knesset Christian Allies Caucus forum? Who would have ever thought there'd be a women's council? Who would have thought these things? And it's God.
God is opening
it's God
the doors.
bringing us
He's
together.
Doors, and it is a
but
blessing.
we have to do the work because that's what's needed.
I've known Sharon Sanders and her husband Ray for years. Together they've been laboring to advance Christ's kingdom in Israel and build bridges between Jews and non-Jews. I've seen as well how Sharon rolls up her sleeves to minister to the poor, to help displaced, dispossessed immigrants who come to Israel with little more than the clothes on their back. And there she is, mothering, loving, and caring and sharing. Great woman, great Christian testimony.
It was wonderful. When we were interviewing her, she was making sure all the crew had something to drink, making sure we were okay. Just a natural tendency to mother people. She reaches out, her ministry reaches out, touches lives, hugs people. How many ministers do you know that just go out and hug people?
Why do we exclude women from ministry when you see an example of rolling up sleeves and loving and sharing and caring? Why is there not room for that in the Lord's work today?
But I think there is, Jeff. I think we're seeing, and I think that's part of what we're doing in the program, is showing that women do have a place. And I think it's a wonderful place. God uses everything for women.
Now, speaking of place, we had a wonderful interview with a mother and a daughter in a place called Gethsemane, didn't we?
It was an interesting interview. I knew these people had been on the tour a couple of times, and then I was talking to them, and a whole other story comes out about how this mother had this child and how this all came about. Wonderful interview.
And the baby was born in Israel, correct?
The baby was conceived in Israel. They were on a tour in Israel. Now I'm spoiling the whole scene, but really I didn't even know it. I'm standing there interviewing, and she's starting to tell me this, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't know this, and I've known these people for years. So it was a wonderful, interesting story, sideline to be in Israel.
Great mother-daughter story.
Great mother-daughter. I think you'll like it. One of my greatest joys is to see parents bring their children to Israel. Betsy brought her daughter many, many years ago, as you were a little girl when you came, and they keep coming back because they love Israel. And I love to see that look and that spark in y'all's eyes. How does it affect you as a woman to love Israel, to know Israel, to come to Israel? How does it affect your faith? How does it affect your witness?
The first time I came here with Elizabeth, I became pregnant. So she is my little baby from Israel. It is such a blessing. And when I come here, I see through God's eyes in a way I can't see at home. I see the flowers. I see where he walked. I see the things he did, what his heartbeat was. And I can relate to the culture so much better. And so I understand what he's trying to say through Jewish eyes that I don't see when I'm in an American culture, perhaps. I really begin to understand the Bible so much better, and I love it.
It puts it all together. It's not an Old Testament, it's not a New Testament, it's one book of the Bible. And you are so young, and yet you love Israel so much.
I do. Israel has a special place in my heart. I came here when I was really young, and was baptized in the Jordan River. And every time I come back, you always get something new, and it strengthens my faith. It helps me grow a lot in the Word, and I try to tell people back home just how they need to come firsthand and just see the sights, because you get to walk where Jesus walked, and you get to experience it just, just seeing his presence where he was. And on the way up here to Jerusalem, when we read the Psalms of Ascent, you open up your Bible and you just see, it just pops off the page, just, seeing the context and firsthand. So yeah, it's Psalm 122:6, where it says, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. It makes sense, doesn't it? As you're driving up and you're coming up, making Aliyah to Israel, to Jerusalem, it really does make sense. Does it strengthen you as women to be here?
Yes, absolutely.
In what way?
It just makes me realize that I need to go out with my faith, and that God can use us in so many ways, and that we can just go out and be lights and shine the truth. And it makes you, after you come here, just really want to go out and just spread the word,
So is this your last trip?
Never.
Never.
And we always try to bring someone back.
Yes.
Oh, God bless you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sacred is the bond between parent and child. 'Tis the moral of the story today.
It is, and you know, the bond of man and wife. We're going to talk to a counselor next week.
Who's that?
But a special counselor, Mrs. Patty Seif. Your wife is going to be with us next week. So that's exciting. I've enjoyed Hannah. I've enjoyed, Eve, and now we're going to talk to Patty Seif, the counselor. Join us next week, and as you go, Sha'alu Shalom Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
The Levitt Letter. This free publication includes Bible lessons, insightful news commentary, Hebrew lessons, and more. Call 1-800-WONDERS. That's 1-800-966-3377. Or write to Zola, Box 12268, Dallas, Texas 75225. You can also see our Levitt Letters, TV programs, and national airing schedule at www.levitt.com. Please remember, Zola Levitt Ministries depends on tax-deductible donations from viewers like you. This has been a paid program brought to you by Zola Levitt Ministries.